My name is Frank Miller. I am 54 years old. For 30 of those years, I owned and operated a small machine shop in Lancaster County, making custom parts for agricultural equipment. What I am about to tell you happened 4 years ago in the late autumn, deep in the Sproul State Forest. I do not expect you to believe it. I am not writing this to convince you. I am writing this because it needs to be said, and I am the only one left who can say it. The trip was an annual tradition. It had been for nearly 2 decades. My friend Dale Peterson and I would take the second week of buck season and drive north, away from the farms and the towns, into the deep woods where you could walk all day and not cross a road or see another soul. We were not trophy hunters. It was about the quiet, the smell of pine and cold, wet earth, the weight of a good rifle in your hands. It was about sitting in a tree stand as the sun came up, watching the world wake up around you. It was a ritual, a way of resetting the year. That year we chose a section of forest we had not been to before, a few miles off a logging road that was barely more than 2 deep ruts in the mud. The drive-in was slow, the suspension of my old Ford groaning in protest. Dale was riding shotgun, navigating with a topographical map spread across his lap. He was a better woodsman than I was, more patient. He saw things I missed. He could read the land in a way that always impressed me. He pointed to a small, unmarked tributary that fed into the main creek. "That looks promising," he said. "Deer will follow the water." We found a decent spot to make camp, a small clearing that was mostly flat, shielded from the north wind by a thick stand of hemlocks. It was already getting cold, the kind of damp cold that gets into your bones. We worked efficiently without much talk. We had done this so many times it was like a dance. I cleared the ground for the tent while Dale gathered firewood. I set up the tent poles and staked the corners while he started a fire in the portable steel fire ring we always brought. We had our system: tent up, sleeping bags unrolled, fire going, camp chairs unfolded. Only then did we allow ourselves to relax. Dale pulled 2 bottles of beer from the cooler and handed one to me. He settled into his chair with a sigh, the firelight catching the gray in his beard. "To another year," he said, and we touched the bottles together. The woods were already dark around us, a solid wall of black beyond the small circle of our fire. The sounds were familiar ones: the crackle of burning oak, the whisper of wind in the high branches, the distant hoot of an owl. It felt right. It felt like every other first night we had ever spent out there. Normal. We talked for a while about work, about our families. Dale's youngest son had just started college. My daughter was pregnant with her first child. We talked about old hunts, about the big 8-pointer I missed a few years back, about the time Dale got turned around and had to use his compass to get back to camp after dark. The stories were old and worn smooth with telling, comfortable like an old flannel shirt. The air grew colder, our breath plumed white in the light from our headlamps. Around 9, we decided to turn in. We had an early start planned, wanting to be in our stands well before sunrise. I remember sleeping soundly at first. The cold did not bother me inside my down sleeping bag. I woke up once in the middle of the night. It was pitch black inside the tent. The fire had died down to embers, just a faint orange glow visible through the mesh of the tent door. Something had woken me, but I was not sure what. I lay there listening. The woods have a different sound at night. Things move. Small animals rustle in the leaves, branches creak. I listened for a long time, trying to place the sound. It was nothing, I told myself. A raccoon, maybe a porcupine. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The morning was cold and sharp. A thin layer of frost covered everything, sparkling in the beams of our headlamps as we moved around camp. We were quiet, speaking only in low murmurs. We made coffee on the little propane stove, the steam rising into the frigid air. We ate oatmeal and checked our gear. Rifle, ammunition, knife, drag rope, compass, water, a small first aid kit. Everything in its place. We pulled on our orange vests and hats, the last things to go on. Dale clapped me on the shoulder. "Good luck," he said. "You too," I replied. We had scouted our spots the day before. Mine was a half-mile east of camp, a natural saddle between two ridges where deer were likely to pass. Dale's was about the same distance to the north, overlooking a clearing where several game trails converged. We walked together for the first few hundred yards, our boots crunching on the frozen leaves. Then our paths diverged. I watched the light from his headlamp disappear into the trees before turning to head toward my own stand. The walk was familiar and comforting. I knew how to move through the woods, how to place my feet to minimize noise, how to use the trees to break up my silhouette. I found my chosen tree, a big old oak, and strapped my climbing stand to it. The process was mechanical, something I had done hundreds of times. Unfold the stand, attach the straps, cinch them tight. I clipped my rifle to the pull rope and started climbing, my boots biting into the bark. 20 feet up, I secured the stand and settled in, pulling the rifle up after me. The world from a tree stand is different. You are above it all, an observer. The woods were still dark, but a faint gray light was beginning to show in the east. I sat perfectly still, letting the forest forget I was there. My breathing slowed, my senses sharpened. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of a leaf registered. This was the part I loved most. The waiting, the anticipation, the absolute quiet. As the sun came up, the woods came alive. Gray squirrels began to chase each other up and down the tree trunks. A flock of turkeys moved through the underbrush below me, their soft clucking sounds carrying on the still air. A doe and 2 fawns appeared on the ridge to my right. They were cautious, testing the wind, their ears swiveling constantly. They were not what I was looking for, but I enjoyed watching them. They browsed for a while and then moved on, melting back into the trees. It was a perfect morning. I stayed in the stand until almost 11. The sun was higher now, but it offered little warmth. My toes were starting to go numb. I decided to head back to camp for some lunch and to warm up by the fire. I lowered my rifle and climbed down, my movements slow and stiff from the hours of sitting still. The walk back was uneventful. I saw plenty of deer sign, tracks, and scrapes, but no bucks. When I got back to camp, Dale was already there, tending the fire. He had a small skillet on the grate, and the smell of frying sausage was thick in the air. He grinned at me. "Any luck?" he asked. "Just a doe," I said, setting my rifle against a tree. "You?" He shook his head. "Saw a spike horn first thing, but he was too small. Let him grow up." We ate lunch and drank more coffee, talking about our plans for the afternoon hunt. We decided to switch spots just to see a different piece of woods. It was something we often did. The afternoon was much like the morning. I sat in the stand Dale had used, a nice spot with a good view of the clearing. The woods were quiet. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The temperature started to drop again. I was starting to think about heading back when I heard it. It was off to my left, deeper in the woods. It was the sound of a branch breaking. A big branch. It was a loud, sharp crack that echoed in the quiet woods. My first thought was a bear. We were in bear country and it was not uncommon to see them, but the sound was wrong. A bear moving through the woods sounds heavy, clumsy. It sounds like something big pushing its way through the brush. This was different. It was a single violent snap, like something had stepped on a deadfall branch the size of my arm and broken it clean in two. It was followed by silence. Absolute silence. The squirrels, which had been chattering all afternoon, went quiet. I sat there for a long time, straining my ears. I scanned the trees in the direction of the sound, my hand tightening on the stock of my rifle. Nothing. No movement. No further sound. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a dead tree had finally given way and dropped a limb. That happened all the time. But it did not feel right. The silence that followed was unnerving. It felt like the woods were holding their breath. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was alone in the woods and my mind was playing tricks on me. After another 20 minutes, I decided to call it a day. The light was fading fast and I did not want to walk back in the dark without a good reason. I climbed down from the stand, moving as quietly as I could. Every little sound I made seemed amplified in the stillness. I slung my rifle over my shoulder and started walking back toward camp, following the trail of reflective tacks we had placed on the trees. I had gone maybe 100 yards when I got the feeling I was being watched. It is a hard thing to describe, a primal instinct. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I stopped and stood perfectly still, listening. I could hear my own heartbeat loud in my ears. I slowly scanned the woods around me. The trees were turning into dark, indistinct shapes in the gathering dusk. I could not see anything, but I could feel it. A focused attention. Something was out there, and it knew I was there. I started walking again, faster this time. I tried to dismiss the feeling, but it would not go away. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see something. I heard another sound then. It was the soft thud of a footstep on damp earth. It was behind me and to my right. It was heavy, too heavy for a deer. I stopped again, my heart pounding. I unslung my rifle and held it in a low, ready position. "Who is there?" I called out. My voice sounded small and thin in the vast woods. There was no answer, only silence. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the cold metal of the rifle in my hands. I was sure I had heard it. It was not my imagination. I took a few slow steps backward, my eyes fixed on the spot where the sound had come from. I could see nothing but a tangle of rhododendron bushes and dark tree trunks. I told myself it was a bear. It had to be a bear. It smelled me, got curious, and was circling around to get a better scent. That made sense. Bears did that, but a bear would have made more noise. I would have heard it breathing, or the rustle of its body moving through the brush. This was different. It was stealthy, deliberate. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the woods. When I had put another 50 yards between me and the spot, I turned and walked quickly, almost jogging back to camp. I did not run. You do not run from a bear, but I wanted to. The fire was a welcome sight, a bright orange beacon in the gloom. Dale was not back yet. I checked my watch. It was well past dark. He should have been back by now. We had a rule: always be back at camp by dark. I threw more wood on the fire, building it up until it was roaring. The light pushed back the darkness, but it also made the shadows deeper and more menacing. Section 1. I called out his name. "Dale!" My voice was swallowed by the trees. I waited. No reply. I tried again, louder this time. "Dale!" Still nothing. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Dale was never late. He was meticulous, always planning, always cautious. It was not like him. I grabbed my most powerful flashlight and my radio. I switched the radio to our channel. "Dale, you there? Over." Static. I tried again. "Dale, this is Frank. Come in. Over." More static. The radios were not top of the line. Their range was limited in the dense, hilly terrain. It was possible he was just out of range. Or maybe his battery had died. There were a dozen logical explanations, but my mind kept going back to the sound in the woods, the feeling of being watched. I decided to walk a little way down the trail toward his stand, hoping to see the light from his headlamp or hear him coming. I walked a few hundred yards, calling his name every so often. The woods were darker and quieter than I had ever known them to be. The beam of my flashlight cut a sharp cone through the blackness, but it only seemed to emphasize how much I could not see. The feeling of being watched returned stronger than ever. I felt exposed, vulnerable. I stopped and listened. I could hear something moving parallel to the trail, keeping pace with me. It was maybe 50 or 60 yards into the woods. It was heavy, but it was quiet. It was not crashing through the undergrowth. It was moving with a purpose, stepping carefully. I swept the beam of my flashlight through the trees, trying to catch a glimpse of it. I saw nothing but a wall of tree trunks and tangled branches. But I knew it was there. I could hear its soft footfalls in the leaves, timed with my own. When I stopped, it stopped. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my attempts at rationalization. This was not a bear. A bear does not stalk a human being like this. It does not move with such stealth. My mouth went dry. I slowly backed away. My flashlight beam still pointed into the trees, my rifle held tight against my shoulder. I retreated all the way back to the camp, to the circle of firelight. Whatever was out there did not follow me into the light. It stayed back in the darkness. I spent the next hour in a state of high alert, pacing around the edge of the fire, my rifle never leaving my hands. I kept the fire blazing, throwing on any piece of wood I could find. The light was my only shield. I tried the radio again and again, my calls unanswered. The worry for Dale was a physical ache in my chest, mixed with the growing terror of my own situation. Where was he? What had happened to him? Around midnight, I knew I could not just wait anymore. Something was wrong. I had to go look for him. It was the stupidest, most reckless thing I could do, leaving the safety of the fire and going into the dark where that thing was waiting. But I could not live with myself if I did not. Dale was my friend. He could be hurt, lying out there in the cold. I loaded my pack with extra batteries for the flashlight, a first aid kit, and a thermos of hot coffee. I chambered a round in my rifle and took a deep breath. I stepped out of the ring of light and started down the trail toward Dale's stand. The darkness felt like a physical weight. The silence was absolute. The thing that had been pacing me earlier was gone, or at least I could no longer hear it. I hoped it had moved on. The trail was easy enough to follow with the reflective tacks. I moved slowly, scanning the woods on either side of me with my flashlight, my ears straining for any sound. My senses were on a razor edge. Every gust of wind, every skittering mouse made me jump. It took me nearly an hour to cover the half-mile to where Dale's stand should be. I found the tree easily enough. The climbing stand was still attached to the trunk, about 20 feet up, but it was empty. I swept my light around the base of the tree. I saw his pack lying on the ground. Next to it was his rifle. My blood ran cold. No hunter willingly separates from his rifle, ever. Something was terribly wrong. I called his name, my voice a ragged whisper. Dale? There was no answer. I moved closer, my light beam dancing over the ground. That is when I saw the drag marks in the leaves. They were wide, as if something heavy had been pulled away from the base of the tree. I followed them with my light. They led away from the trail deeper into a thicket of mountain laurel. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. I knew I should not follow those marks. I knew I should turn around, go back to the truck, and get help. But I had to know. I had to find him. I followed the drag marks into the thicket, the stiff branches scraping at my clothes. The marks went on for about 30 yards and then stopped in a small, sheltered hollow. What I saw there will never leave me. Dale was on the ground. He was not moving. And standing over him was a creature. It was hunched over, its back to me, illuminated in the sudden stark beam of my flashlight. For a moment, my brain simply refused to process what I was seeing. It was too impossible. It was tall, even hunched over. Easily 7 feet if it stood up straight. It was covered in coarse dark fur like that of a wolf or a large dog, but patchy in places, revealing dull gray skin underneath. Its frame was wrong. It was gaunt, but powerfully built. The shoulders were immensely broad, wider than any man. The arms were long, too long for the body, and they ended in what I can only describe as hands. They were not paws. They had long, thick fingers tipped with heavy yellowed claws. Paragraph. The legs were the strangest part. They were bent backward like the hind legs of a dog, but they were long and thick with muscle. It was standing on 2 feet, but it was clear it could move on all fours just as easily. A short, mangy tail hung down behind it. The smell hit me then, a rank, musky odor of wet fur, rotting meat, and something else, something metallic and sharp. It was the smell of blood. It had not noticed me yet. It was preoccupied with Dale. I raised my rifle, the scope useless at this range. I looked through my iron sights, the front post wavering as my hands shook. My mind was screaming, "Shoot it! Shoot it now!" But I was frozen. I could not reconcile what I was seeing with the world I knew. It was a thing from a nightmare. Then it turned its head. It must have heard the click of my rifle safety, or maybe it just sensed me. It turned its head slowly over its shoulder, and its eyes locked onto mine. They were not the eyes of an animal. Animals have a flat, unreadable look. These eyes were intelligent. They were a pale, luminous yellow, and they glowed in the beam of my flashlight. And they were filled with a cold, hateful cunning. The head was shaped like that of a timber wolf, with a long muzzle and powerful jaws. But it was too large, too misshapen. The fur on its face was thinner, and I could see the underlying structure of the skull. The lips were black and thin, pulled back in a silent snarl to reveal long yellow canines. Not just the front fangs, but all the teeth were long and pointed like a mouthful of daggers. A line of drool trickled from the corner of its mouth. We stared at each other for a long second that stretched into an eternity. My entire world narrowed down to those yellow eyes. The rational part of my brain was gone. There was no room for disbelief anymore, only a primal, gut-wrenching terror. This thing was real. It had killed my friend. And now it was looking at me. It let out a low growl, a deep rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate in my chest. It was not the growl of a bear or a dog. It was deeper, more resonant. It was a sound of pure menace. It straightened up slightly, rising to its full, terrifying height. It was massive, a silhouette of impossible angles against the darkness. It took a step toward me. That broke my paralysis. I did not even think. I aimed for the center of its chest and pulled the trigger. The roar of the .30-06 was deafening in the small hollow. The rifle bucked hard against my shoulder. I saw the muzzle flash illuminate the creature in a brief, hellish tableau. I saw the fur on its chest fly as the bullet hit. Any other animal, a deer, a bear, even a moose, would have gone down from a shot like that. It would have been knocked off its feet, dead or dying. This thing just grunted. It staggered back a step, a look of what I can only describe as surprised fury on its face. It looked down at the wound in its chest, a dark, spreading stain on its fur, and then it looked back at me. And it screamed. It was not a roar or a howl. It was a high, piercing shriek of rage and pain. It was a sound that did not belong in the natural world. It was a sound that scraped my nerves raw and made me want to claw my own ears off. Then it dropped to all fours. The transformation in its movement was sickeningly fast. One moment it was a bipedal giant, the next it was a low, quadrupedal predator. It moved with a fluid, unnatural grace like a huge spider. It covered the distance between us in 3 long, bounding strides. I tried to work the bolt on my rifle to chamber another round, but my hands were clumsy with fear. I was too slow. It hit me like a freight train. The impact threw me backward and my head slammed against a tree. The world exploded in a flash of white light. The rifle flew from my hands. I was on my back, the wind knocked out of me, gasping for air. The creature was on top of me, its weight crushing my chest. I could feel its hot, foul breath on my face. Those yellow eyes were inches from mine. I saw its mouth open, the long teeth dripping with saliva. I knew I was dead. I threw my arm up to protect my face, a useless, reflexive gesture. It lunged and its jaws clamped down on my forearm. The pain was unbelievable, a white-hot agony that eclipsed everything else. I felt the bones snap. I screamed, a thin, pathetic sound. Its weight shifted as it worried my arm, shaking its head back and forth like a dog with a chew toy. My flashlight had fallen to the ground and its beam was pointing off to the side, casting long, dancing shadows. In that flickering light, I saw my hunting knife, still sheathed on my belt. Adrenaline surged through me, a desperate, last-ditch survival instinct. With my good hand, I fumbled for the snap on the sheath. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages. The creature was still savaging my broken arm. I finally got the knife free. I did not aim. I just plunged the 6-inch blade with all my strength into the side of its neck, right below the jaw. It shrieked again, that same horrifying, unnatural sound, and let go of my arm. It recoiled, shaking its head, a dark stream of blood pumping from the wound in its neck. It was not a fatal blow, but it had hurt it. It had surprised it. It gave me the second I needed. I scrambled backward on the ground, crab-walking through the dirt and leaves, kicking with my legs to push myself away. The pain in my arm was a dull, throbbing fire. The creature stood on its hind legs again, one hand-like paw pressed to the wound in its neck. It stared at me, its yellow eyes burning with a furious, murderous light. It took a hesitant step toward me and then another. I found my feet stumbling, my body screaming in protest. I did not look for my rifle. I did not look back at Dale. I just turned and ran. I ran blindly through the woods, branches whipping at my face, thorns tearing at my clothes. I did not know where I was going. I was just running away from that thing. I could hear it behind me. It was crashing through the brush, no longer trying to be stealthy. It was fast, terrifyingly fast. I could hear its heavy footfalls, its guttural, angry breathing. I risked a glance over my shoulder. It was gaining on me, a huge, dark shape loping through the trees, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4. My lungs burned. My legs felt like lead. The pain in my arm was a constant, blinding wave of agony. I knew I could not outrun it. It was going to catch me. I was going to die out here in the dark. I burst out of the trees and onto the narrow trail. I recognized where I was. Camp was just ahead. The fire, the light. I put on a final burst of speed driven by pure terror. I could see the glow of the embers through the trees, 50 yards, 40, 30. I could hear the thing right behind me, so close I could almost feel its breath on my neck. I stumbled into the clearing and did not stop. I ran straight past the fire, past the tent, toward the place where I had parked the truck. The truck was my only hope. I fumbled in my pocket for the keys, my good hand shaking so violently I could barely grasp them. I heard the creature burst into the clearing behind me. It stopped at the edge of the firelight, hesitant to enter the circle of light. It let out a frustrated, guttural roar. I found the key, jammed it into the lock. It would not turn. My hands were slick with my own blood. I tried again. The lock clicked open. I yanked the door open and threw myself inside, landing hard on the passenger seat. I scrambled over the center console into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut and hitting the lock button. A fraction of a second later, the thing hit the side of the truck. The whole vehicle rocked with the impact. A huge clawed hand slammed against the driver's side window, the thick safety glass cracking with a spiderweb pattern. It roared again, a sound of pure, thwarted rage right outside my window. I could see its distorted face through the fractured glass, the yellow eyes burning. I jammed the key into the ignition and twisted. The old engine turned over once, twice, and then caught with a roar. I slammed the truck into drive and stomped on the gas pedal. The tires spun in the mud, then caught. The truck lurched forward. I did not bother with the headlights. I just drove, careening down the rutted logging road in the dark, bouncing and sliding, scraping against trees. In the rearview mirror, I saw it for a moment, standing in the middle of the logging road, illuminated by my brake lights. It was on two legs again, a towering, monstrous silhouette. It watched me go, and then it turned and melted back into the blackness of the woods. I do not remember much of the drive out. It is a blur of pain and terror. I must have driven for an hour before I hit a paved road. I saw a sign for a town and followed it. I ended up in a small town with a volunteer fire station and a single police car. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour convenience store, the only place with lights on. I stumbled out of the truck and collapsed on the asphalt. Someone must have called for help. The next thing I remember clearly is the face of a paramedic looking down at me, his voice calm and reassuring. Then there were police officers asking questions I could not answer. I told them we were attacked by a bear, a large, rabid black bear. I told them it came into our camp. I told them it got my friend. I knew it sounded thin. I knew they would have questions, but what else could I say? Who would believe the truth? They would have locked me in a psychiatric ward. They took me to a hospital in a larger town. My left forearm was shattered. The doctor said the bite marks were unusual, too deep, the spacing of the teeth all wrong for a bear. They were more like a wolf, they said, but impossibly large. I just kept repeating my story. It was a bear, a big bear. A search party was organized. They went back to our campsite the next day. They found the truck, the door dented, the window smashed. They found the camp torn apart. They found Dale's body not far from where I had left it. They found my rifle. They found a lot of blood, mine and his. And they found another type of blood on the ground and on my knife, which they recovered. It was not human, and it did not match any known animal in their database. They found tracks, too. Huge canine-like tracks, but the stride was all wrong. They found prints where it had walked on two legs. The official report in the end listed the cause of death as an animal attack by an unidentified predator, likely a black bear of unusual size and aggression. They closed the case. It was cleaner that way. I never went back to my machine shop. I sold it a few months after I got out of the hospital. My arm healed, but it is not right. It is full of metal plates and screws. It aches when the weather gets cold. But the physical scars are the easy part. I sold my house. I could not stay in Pennsylvania. It was too close to the mountains, too close to the deep woods. I live in a city now in Florida, a flat place with no forests, surrounded by concrete and people. I do not like the quiet anymore. I sleep with the television on. I never go out after dark if I can help it. I have a license to carry a concealed weapon, and I am never without it. A 9mm pistol. It feels small and useless compared to what I know is out there. I have nightmares every night. Sometimes I see its face, those yellow eyes. Sometimes I hear that terrible scream. Sometimes I am back in the woods running, feeling its breath on my neck. I wake up covered in sweat, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I know what I saw. It was not a bear. It was not a man in a suit. It was a real, living thing of flesh and blood. I shot it and it bled. I stabbed it and it felt pain. It exists. It is out there in the deep, dark places of the world where people do not go. I do not know what it is or where it comes from. I only know that it is strong, it is smart, and it is full of hate. I am telling you this so that you will know too. Stay out of the woods. Stay in the light. Because some things that hunt in the night are real.